Vedantasara. Vedantasara. There is a text in the Advaita Vedanta tradition called the Vedantasara, which means something like the essence or the very marrow of Vedantic teaching. It is attributed to a teacher named Sadananda Yogindra, who most scholars place somewhere in the 15th century, a period when Sanskrit learning had grown fragmented, and students could recite the great conclusions of Shankara's non-dual philosophy without really understanding how to work with them. The Vedantasara was written to close that gap. It is not a devotional poem or a philosophical treatise in the discursive sense. It is closer to a precise diagnostic manual, one that traces the architecture of ordinary experience all the way down to its ground, and then shows you that the ground was never separate from you. It is a short text, but it asks everything of the reader. Let us begin. Sadananda does not open with a cosmological flourish. He opens with a question about you specifically. Are you ready for this teaching? Before the text will say anything about the nature of reality, it establishes who can actually receive what it is about to say. This is not gatekeeping in a hierarchical sense. It is diagnostic precision. A surgeon does not begin operating without checking whether the patient can survive the procedure. Sadananda begins by checking whether the student can survive the teaching, which is to say, whether the student is prepared to have their most fundamental assumptions dissolved. The qualified student, the adhikari, is identified by 4 prerequisites taken together. These are the sadhana chatustaya, the fourfold means of attainment, and Sadananda treats them as structural requirements rather than moral recommendations. Without them, the teaching will not take. With them, the teaching cannot fail to take. Let us go through them one by one. The first is viveka, discrimination, not judgment of other people, but the capacity to distinguish clearly between what is permanent and what is impermanent, between what is real in the deepest sense and what merely appears real for a time. The student who has viveka has already noticed, at some level, that everything in experience changes. Bodies change, thoughts change, relationships change, the world changes, and the student has begun to ask whether there is anything that does not change. That question, when it arises as a genuine question rather than a philosophical curiosity, is viveka functioning in the student's life. The second is vairagya, dispassion. This does not mean indifference or coldness. It means that the student has seen clearly enough that temporary pleasures and possessions cannot deliver the permanent satisfaction they seem to promise. The student who has vairagya is not contemptuous of the world. They simply no longer expect the world to solve the problem they now understand the world cannot solve. There is a quietness that comes with this, a loosening of urgency around acquisition. The third is the sixfold inner wealth, shatkasampati. These 6 qualities work as a cluster. Shama is the stilling of the mind, the capacity to rest the mind in the teaching rather than letting it scatter. Dharma is the restraint of the sense organs, not suppression, but the ability to direct attention rather than be dragged by sensation. Uparama is the withdrawal from activities that do not serve the inquiry. Titiksha is the capacity to bear difficulty without complaint, to sit with discomfort without demanding that it change. Shraddha is a trusting confidence in the teacher and the teaching, an openness that allows instruction to land rather than being filtered immediately through skepticism. And samadhana is the capacity to hold the mind steady on the objects of inquiry, a kind of collected attentiveness. The fourth is mumukshutva, the burning desire for liberation, not mild interest, not intellectual curiosity about Vedanta as a system, a genuine, active, insistent desire to be free from the condition of mistaking oneself for something temporary and limited. Sadananda regards this as the most important prerequisite of all. If the desire for liberation is strong enough, it will compensate for relative weakness in the others. If it is absent, no amount of philosophical intelligence will carry the student through. This is how the Vedantasara begins, not with the universe, but with the student sitting in front of a teacher asking whether they are ready. If the answer is yes, the teaching proceeds. If the answer is no, the preparation continues until the answer is yes. With that established, Sadananda turns to the nature of what the student is about to understand. The ground state generates all appearances. The appearances obscure the ground state. Liberation dissolves the obscuration. The dissolution reveals what never changed. The universe exists. This statement is structurally incorrect. Maya, the scope restriction, projects phenomena onto the ground state. The projection creates apparent multiplicity. You mistake the projection for base reality. Consider the pot and the sky. A clay pot sits in an open field. Inside the pot there is space. Outside the pot there is the same open sky that extends in every direction without limit. We call the space inside the pot Ghatakasha, pot space. We call the space outside Mahakasha, infinite space. These names suggest two different spaces, but space does not divide. The clay of the pot does not cut the space. It only appears to limit it from the perspective of something inside the pot looking out. Remove the pot, shatter it, and no joining of two spaces occurs because they were never two spaces. There was only one space, appearing for a moment to be bounded by a form that arose within it. Your identity operates identically. The apparent individual, the jiva, is like the space inside the pot. The ground state, Brahman, is like the infinite sky. The boundaries that seem to separate the two are made of the same Maya that makes the clay pot seem to enclose space. Remove the superimposition and no merging of two consciousnesses occurs because they were never two consciousnesses. There was only one awareness, appearing for a moment to be bounded by a form that arose within it. This is the central image Sadananda returns to, not the wave and the ocean, which is a beautiful image, but belongs more naturally to other streams of the tradition. The pot space and the sky space, Ghatakasha and Mahakasha, the same substance, appearing for a time to be bounded, always already free. The error occurs at the identification point. You identify with the appearance pattern. The pattern includes body, thoughts, biography. These are projection elements, not substance. Adhyasa, the superimposition, layers the temporary onto the permanent. The permanent is Atman, the invariant. The temporary includes all experiential content. Now Sadananda introduces the architecture through which the superimposition operates, and this is where the text becomes extraordinarily precise. It is not enough to say that you mistake yourself for something temporary. We need to know exactly what that something is, how it is structured, what it is made of, and how many layers of it there are. This is the doctrine of the three bodies and the five sheaths, and Sadananda treats it as essential scaffolding for everything that follows. The first body is the sthula sharira, the gross body. This is the physical form, built from the five great elements in their dense manifest state: Earth, water, fire, air, space, combined and compacted into the visible, tangible structure you inhabit. The gross body is born, it grows, it changes, it dies. It is the outermost layer of the apparent individual. Most people, for most of their lives, take this body to be what they are. The Vedantasara says, "This is what you have, not what you are." The second body is the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. This is far more extensive than the gross body, and in some ways more important, because it is the subtle body that travels from life to life, carrying the impressions of experience, the karmic residue, the tendencies and dispositions that make you recognizably yourself across time. The subtle body contains 17 components. There are the 5 subtle sense organs, the Jnanendriyas: hearing, touching, seeing, tasting, smelling. There are the 5 subtle organs of action, the Karmendriyas: speech, grasping, locomotion, procreation, elimination. There is the mind, manas, which receives and processes sensory input. There is the intellect, buddhi, which discriminates and decides. There is chitta, the memory storehouse. And there is ahamkara, the eye-maker, the function that takes the stream of experience and stamps it with the sense of a personal owner. The subtle body is the instrument of experience. It is not the experiencer. The third body is the Karana Sharira, the causal body. This is the subtlest layer, the seed state from which both gross and subtle bodies emerge. It corresponds to the state of deep dreamless sleep, where all the particularity of experience dissolves into an undifferentiated stillness. The causal body is essentially beginningless ignorance, avidya in its densest form, not negative ignorance so much as the primal not knowing that makes apparent individuation possible in the first place. It is the soil in which the seeds of future experience are stored. Sadananda then maps these 3 bodies onto 5 sheaths, the pancha kosha, which function as concentric coverings over the Atman, the pure consciousness at the center. The outermost sheath is the annamaya kosha, the food body, the physical form sustained by food. Inside that is the pranamaya kosha, the vital energy body, the breath and life force that animates the physical form. Inside that is the manamaya kosha, the mental body, the functional mind, and the sensory organs attached to it. Inside that is the Vajnanamaya kosha, the discriminating intellect, the capacity for reasoning and judgment. And inside that, the most subtle of the 5 coverings, is the Anandamaya kosha, the bliss body, which corresponds to the causal layer, the deep sleep state, the condition of relative peace that comes when all the activity of the outer sheaths has temporarily quieted. None of these 5 sheaths is you. This is the point Sadananda is building toward. Each sheath can be observed. Each sheath has qualities that change. Each sheath appears and disappears across the 3 states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. You, the Atman, are the one for whom all 5 sheaths appear. You are not any of the coverings. You are what the coverings cover. 3 levels structure all experience. Individual, cosmic, structural correspondence runs between them. The individual waking state corresponds to cosmic gross manifestation. Your dream state corresponds to cosmic subtle manifestation. Your deep sleep corresponds to cosmic causal ignorance. This is not metaphor, not poetry, structural correspondence. The eye is not merely an organ. The eye is localized solar function. The sun illuminates the cosmos. The eye illuminates objects for you. Same function, different scope. The mind is not merely cognitive activity. The mind is localized lunar function. The moon reflects cosmic light. Your mind reflects awareness. Same function, different scope. Every organ maps to a cosmic principle. Every function scales from individual to cosmic. You are not a separate entity in the universe. You are the universe functioning through apparent individuation. The pot space is not different from the sky space. The consciousness in you is not different from the consciousness that is the ground state. The apparent boundary is made of the same clay that makes the pot. Remove the clay of superimposition, and there is only the one awareness, which was never actually divided. Creation runs forward from subtle to gross. Liberation, understood as a reversal of the binding process, traces back through the same architecture. Sadananda describes the process of elemental resolution carefully, and here the order matters. The gross elements dissolve back into the subtle principles from which they were produced. Space, which arose from sound, dissolves back into sound, the tanmatra of sound. Air, which arose from touch, dissolves back into the tanmatra of touch. Fire, which arose from form, dissolves back into the tanmatra of form. Water, which arose from taste, dissolves back into the tanmatra of taste. Earth, which arose from smell, dissolves back into the tanmatra of smell. This is the sequence: space into sound, air into touch, fire into form, water into taste, earth into smell. The subtle elements, the tanmatras, then dissolve into their causal ground. The causal ground dissolves into the witness. The direction of resolution follows the direction of origination, reversed. Sakshin, the witness, observes all states, waking, dream, deep sleep. The witness remains unchanged through all transformations. You are not the observed states. You are the witness of the states. The witness has no qualities, no biography, no preferences, no mortality. The witness is pure awareness functioning as the invariant ground of all observation. When the inquiry deepens, personal problems are seen in their true proportion. Hunger is recognized as a cosmic metabolic process occurring in the gross body. Thinking is recognized as a cosmic reflective process occurring in the subtle body. Death is recognized as the dissolution of the three bodies, not the dissolution of what you are. The problems do not disappear. Their nature changes. What seemed like a personal emergency is seen as a cosmic event occurring within awareness. This shift does not require effort. It requires clarity. That thou art, Tat Tvam Asi, the identity statement. That refers to the ground state as described in Scripture. Thou refers to your essential nature as it presently appears. The direct equation seems to present an impossibility. The ground state is described as omniscient, omnipotent, the cause of the universe. You appear limited, ignorant, bounded by body and biography. How can these two be identical? Sadananda resolves this through the method of partial abandonment. The terms that and thou each carry two kinds of meaning. There is the apparent, conventional meaning, what each term seems to refer to on the surface, and there is the essential, underlying meaning, what each term actually points to when the surface attributes are set aside. From that, discard the conventional attributes: omniscience, omnipotence, cosmic creativity, the status of universal cause. These are the attributes of Ishvara, the Lord functioning through Maya, and they belong to the conventional description, not to the essential nature. Retain what remains when those are removed: pure consciousness, pure awareness, the simple fact of being and knowing. From thou discard the conventional attributes: limitation, ignorance, biographical identity, the particular history of this body and this mind. These belong to the superimposed layers, the 5 sheaths, the 3 bodies. Retain what remains when those are removed: pure consciousness, pure awareness, the simple fact of being and knowing. Pure consciousness equals pure consciousness. The equation holds, not because you are being elevated to cosmic status, and not because the cosmos is being reduced to personal scale, but because when both terms are stripped to their essential nature, they name the same thing. The pot space and the sky space are both, essentially, space. Tat Tvam Asi translates as, the consciousness that is the ground state and the consciousness that appears as individual awareness are one consciousness, not metaphor, structural correspondence at the level of essential nature. Moksha, liberation, occurs through recognition, not through acquisition or attainment. Sadananda is precise here. You cannot attain what you already are. The Atman is not produced by any process. It is not reached at the end of a journey. It is what you are at every moment of the journey, including the moments when you do not know it. Recognition has 2 modes in the Vedantasara's account. In Savikalpa Samadhi, the knower-known distinction is maintained. The meditating awareness holds the ground state as its object of contemplation. There is stillness, clarity, a direct apprehension of the truth, but the structure of subject and object remains. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, that structure dissolves. The meditating awareness does not hold the ground state as an object because there is no longer a separate subject to do the holding. Awareness rests in itself, as itself, without division. Sadananda does not characterize this as an irreversible event in some permanent, mechanical sense. The canonical text does not make that claim. What it describes is the recognition of what is already the case. The pot space has always been the sky space. The recognition does not create a new state. It reveals the nature of the state that has always been. Whether that recognition stabilizes or must be renewed through continued enquiry and practice is a matter Sadananda leaves within the larger context of the teacher-student relationship, not a feature he builds into the definition of moksha itself. The individual appears to continue after recognition. The 5 sheaths continue to function. The 3 bodies continue their respective processes. The gross body eats and sleeps and eventually dies. The subtle body continues its activities of perception and cognition. But the identification with these bodies as what you are, that identification is what liberation dissolves. The Jivanmukta, the one liberated while living, continues in apparent form. The mistake that took that form to be the self does not continue. The pot space has no edges of its own. The edges belong to the pot. When the pot is set aside through recognition, no bounded space is destroyed. Only the appearance of boundedness ends. What remains is what was always there, the one awareness without limit, without beginning, without end, which the Vedantasara calls Brahman, and which you have never, for a single moment, ceased to be. This is the Vedantasara, the structural essence of the final teaching. The teaching begins with the student. It moves through the architecture of apparent individuality, through the 3 bodies and 5 sheaths, through the correspondence between individual and cosmos, through the precise logic of the great identity statement. And it ends where it began, with you now knowing what you are. The ground state generates all appearances. You are the ground state, the appearance continues, the mistake ends. Recognition is everything, becoming is nothing, the invariant never changes, the invariant is your deepest nature. Welcome home.